It's a pleasure to call the meeting to order on this very significant day. Anybody know what's significant about today? It's Pi Day. We're not having pizza though, right? That's right. But I thank everybody for coming. We are having a bit of a hybrid meeting today. A few board members have requested to be on screen. So they are zooming in or whatever version of that we use, which would include Debbie Nguyen, Bill Holtzman, one of our newer members, John Peterson, Delegate Terry Austin, and Speaker Gilbert. They are all on the screen. And why don't you go ahead and describe what the Microsoft Teams platform is like?
Thank you. We're using Microsoft Teams today. DHCD agency went through our migration this week from G Suite and Gmail to Microsoft. It's been very exciting. In accordance with the board's electronic participation policy, all members participating remotely should ensure that their cameras are on if the technology provides that ability to ensure that we're recording all member votes accurately. Just a reminder for those joining virtually that we will be doing a roll call vote for you. So make sure, Debbie, other members who are participating, make sure you know where that unmute button is when we do that roll call vote. Thank you. There's icons on the top of your screen, one for muting your speakers and one for turning off your camera. Again, we appreciate members leave their camera on. We would appreciate also that members of the public leave their Microsoft microphones muted. The red icon in the upper right is leave. If you leave, you will need to come back to participate. So just use the link to do that. The settings options located at the top of the screen under the More button. So if you are having any challenges, either with audio or visual, you may find the answers to your questions there. On the top of the agenda, there is a phone number that is a direct dial number for Mr. Billy Gamble. If any members or members of the public are having technical difficulties, please feel free to call or text Mr. Gamble and he will get you fixed up there. These proceedings will be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Cody, if you will do the roll call.
Sure. Ms. Agee.
Here.
Delegate Austin.
Present.
Senator Barker.
Here.
Secretary Cummings. Mr. Davenport. Mr. Dyke.
Here.
Mr. Fralin.
Here.
Ms. Frymouth.
Yeah.
Speaker Gilbert.
Here.
Mr. Holtzman.
Here.
Senator Howell. Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Wanarena.
Here.
Delegate Kilgore.
Here.
Mr. King.
Here.
Delegate Knight.
Here.
Secretary Merrick.
This is Deputy Secretary Benedetto in her stead.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson. Senator Rupp.
Here.
Mr. Stottlemyre.
Here.
Ms. Trigiani.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. West. Mr. Nguyen.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. At this time, we would like to open the floor for comments from the public. If you wish to speak, either make note in the chat feature on your Microsoft Teams at this time, or please sign in the front of the room. Members of the public will be recognized to speak on a first come, first served basis. Cody, can you please recognize any members of the public who have indicated that they wish to speak?
Madam Chair, we had nobody who pre-registered to speak for this meeting.
Okay. Are there any members of the public? Anyone online who wishes to speak? Kelly? Great, okay. We do have a consent agenda. You recall from previous meetings, we do try to put some of the minutia, I guess you'd say, in the consent agenda. But as always, if there's anything there that you would like to pull and vote on separately, please let me know now. If no, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Cody, could you please conduct a roll call for the vote?
Sure. Delegate Alston,
Yes.
Speaker Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. Boltzmann,
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen.
Yes.
Everybody in the room can
Everybody in
speak
the
up.
room, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Consent agenda is passed. Okay, now we are going to have a special presentation. Unfortunately, Secretary Merritt couldn't be with us. But we're going to have a special presentation from the Governor's Economic Development Policy agenda with, speaking on her behalf is Deputy Secretary Joseph Benevento. And is he online? Yes. Yes,
Yep.
up there. And
Thank you.
Joseph, thank you for being with us.
She's trying to get better reception. At the moment, she's not with us. She's with us in spirit, but not with technology. So I'd be happy to share just a few remarks on her behalf about the Government Compete to Win economic plan that was rolled out a few months ago. We've spent months working with internal and external stakeholders, and we actually engaged with McKinsey as well through a 6 to 8 week deep dive into understanding better what are Virginia's unique assets and rights to win in the marketplace as we compete ultimately today to attract talent, gain talent, of course, develop talent. And what we see from the data was that starting around 2015, there's been a pretty directional trend where Virginia was experiencing a net out-migration of its population. Up to that year, there were only about 2 years out of the previous 30 or so where that had occurred. And so 2013, there was a real inflection, and that trend has continued prior to COVID, through COVID, and after COVID. And we examined where the states that were attracting and having a net positive inflow of migration were. And those peer states that we have identified as sort of our best in class, varsity competitors, peer states are North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, and Texas. And so why is that important, you may ask? And the reason is because as talent flows out, companies follow talent. That's becoming a key critical decision factor for companies as where they do business. And that, of course, leads to a loss of the tax revenue base, which then, of course, affects things like healthcare and education and other public service goods in those communities. So it's something that has been occurring maybe without our full awareness or appreciation of, but the longer term impacts can be quite significant and at certain points potentially very difficult to reverse. And so our Compete to Win plan incorporates 6 key tenets. The largest one, that I mention as it relates to Virginia is really around talent workforce. Other ones are relevant as well, such as site development, tax rates, innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems, unleashing the talent workforce pathways. And there's been a proposal for a meaningful budget amendment that would flow through Go Virginia, as you all, I'm sure, fully aware of. And so we're hopeful that that will reach ultimate resolution in the not too distant future here with the overall budget. The last thing I'll mention is the lens that we are looking through Virginia and measuring not just the inputs, but the outputs and the outcomes. So we understand, money gets spent here, resources are devoted there. We're really trying to shine an even greater spotlight on what the outcomes are, which I know Go Virginia does a good job of through its evaluation processes as well. And understanding are those outcomes the desired outcomes that we're setting out as objectives up front, and looking at them in two ways. One, in an absolute sense. So, for example, is Virginia or is a certain metric, growing or shrinking? Is it positive or negative? And obviously, we want it to be positive and growing in an absolute sense, but not looking at it just in that sole vacuum, but understanding also how does that stack up relative to other states as well that we're competing against. And so I like to use the analogy of if a president of a business division unit, came to us and said, hey, our division grew sales 10% year over year, and, give a good pat on the back. Well, if the overall industry for that division grew 30%, then it might suggest a different perspective, that maybe we're losing market share or maybe we're lagging rather than leading. So we're applying those two lenses about both measuring outcomes in an absolute sense, as well as in a relative comparison on a national basis, and specifically to those key competitor peer states that I mentioned. And I'll pause there. Happy to entertain any questions.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Deputy Secretary. I think you're speaking to the choir here. We're all very focused on growing the economy in Virginia. Obviously, that's who we are. Do you have other remarks you'd like to make?
Yeah, we're very much looking forward to budget resolution, as that's still outstanding. And obviously, Go Virginia has a great opportunity with that outcome as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody want to make an announcement today? But you all wants to leave.
Enough said.
If I could just add, Terry G, that Brian Horn and I went over and met with Secretary Merrick and Deputy Secretary Benevento, and especially after the release of this Compete to Win policy agenda, I was particularly interested in the stated strategies, but also the industry targets that the governor has emphasized as areas of high opportunity. We laid those against the priority industry clusters that each Go Virginia region had indicated they wanted to support through their growth and diversification plan, and really almost perfection in terms of alignment. There were opportunities. I was super excited to see really the nexus or convergence, if you will, between the regional priorities and the state priorities that are detailed in this plan. So I wanted to mention that we've done that type of analysis.
I just wanted to add one point. It wasn't mentioned, but I think it was clearly part of the agenda. And this is something that Brian has been working on, is the addition of making attainable and affordable housing available, workforce housing. That is an absolutely critical issue. And I'm glad to see that the department is moving forward in some legislation was enacted that will help give you some more tools to address that. So I think that's very, very important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So you all know, we sent the Compete to Win pamphlet, I guess you call it, not just out to all of you, and you probably got 3 or 4 copies of, but we sent it to everyone involved in leadership and government across the state. So, to get that word out carefully. Secretary Cummings, thanks for being.
Hello,
here.
sorry.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Well, thank you all. Let's move into the director's report, and I'd like to ask Sarah to introduce the applications that are before us today.
Good, thank you. I would just like you to know, we received a total of 10 applications in February 2023 as part of this past quarter's application cycle. I will correct myself and say there were actually 11. There was one application which was withdrawn by the region, which will not be presented to you today. There were 9 per capita regional implementation projects that represent proposals from each region's per capita pool, and 1 talent pathways initiative planning project representing that new pool of funds focused on developing strategies and planning efforts to further refine and develop talent pathways for a select group of priority industry sectors. I want to talk a little bit about the application process for our new members, our existing members, just to make sure everybody understands kind of procedurally and sequentially how these applications come to you. The first process really starts at the regional level. So very much these applications are developed and refined at the regional level and then submitted and vetted by the regional councils. So when they do come to DHCD through our grant application system, they have already been endorsed and approved by the regional council. So that's first step. DHCD, we review the applications for their technical adherence to state law, any policies that this body has developed to implement the program, any administrative guidance that DHCD has issued to further really reinforce and create more clarity around the application process and the program requirements. We then convene a work group, okay? And many of you have been involved in these work groups. We have no more than 2 board members and then subject matter experts, which are really selected from a curated list that includes other state agency partners or organizations or individuals that we know have deep subject matter expertise. And that is really by intention. All of these projects are so different. My staff could never expect to have specialty, especially when you see the technical aspects of some of these applications. So we really do count and lean on our agency partners. And then the staff also invites the applicant to what we call a pitch call, which is really a very brief opportunity to interact with the work group to present their project and their concept. And in almost all cases, the regional council chair or a member of the regional council is there to assist in that presentation. And I don't know, Doug, I think I don't want to speak for you, but it's an opportunity for the state board members to interact a little bit with regional council members. I don't know if you have anything to comment.
No, I think it's really good. Yeah, Sarah, I think it's good because there's subject matter experts that can sometimes do that. You're talking about technology, or you're talking about, we're going to talk about one today, the green hydrogen initiative in Hampton Roads. A chance to kind of probe a little bit to see is, does this hold water? Does this project, will it result in jobs that will be sustaining, and a number of other issues that just, when we come together as a board, you don't have the time to go through it. So I think it's real healthy, and I think that I've enjoyed being a part of those work groups.
Good, thanks a lot for that. On that, I would just like to recognize all of the board members who did participate, including Nancy Agee, Jim Dyke, Haywood Fraglin, Leah Freemow, Doug Monarina, John King, and Pia Trigiani all participated in the work groups. And these are not small commitments, in some cases half-day commitments to discuss the applications, meet with the applicants, and come to some type of consensus recommendation, which works its way to all of you. We did invite a number of subject matter experts. Bill Donahue, the president and executive director of Gen Edge. Gen Edge is the state's manufacturing extension partnership and has access to really a nationwide network of experts in a lot of different areas. John Hagwood, regional growth manager for Gen Edge. Debbie Irwin, executive director of the Shenandoah Community Capital Fund. Angela Lawhorn, who's the director of career education and workforce partnerships with the Virginia Community College System. Don Loftus, manager of sites and buildings, real estate solutions, VEDP. Heather McKay, executive director of the Virginia Office of Education Economics, VEDP. Abigail Patterson, sites and buildings analyst, VEDP. And Jennifer Stevens, who's president and CEO of Virginia Education Strategies. I would also like to note that staff consulted independent of the work group review with Virginia Energy, as well as another member of the EDP strategy team to just have discussions about particular applications, obviously those having to do with energy and those having to do with some of the new strategic initiatives that are coming out of DC, namely the CHIPS Act. We'll talk a little bit about that application here. So after presentation of all the applications, Chair Agee will call for a discussion and a vote. And we'll begin with the 9 per capita implementation applications you have in front of you. 5 of these are from talent development, which we have certainly heard is becoming a really big throttle or constraint on Virginia's economic growth. And 2 are from the startup ecosystem investment strategy, and 2 are from cluster scale up. Cluster scale up, it's kind of an interesting new word. For those that are new to the board, where we've really seen this kind of cluster scale up idea manifest, if there's a new or emerging industry cluster, I'll use small modular nuclear reactors as an example. How do we build a new energy cluster around some of these new technologies? Offshore wind is one that's presented itself. Advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing. So how do we take, when we have a significant advantage of capability, intellectual property, location that's optimized for a particular activity, and really build a new industry cluster? The other way we've seen that kind of manifest is if we have an existing industry cluster and an opportunity to pivot those capabilities. So I'll use an example of a company, this is a great example, that was making car parts, and we want them to we want to help them make airplane parts, right? We want to help them pivot to a new market opportunity, and we've also seen that happen as well. We evaluate these, and this evaluation criteria was established by the Go Virginia State Board at the beginning. This program's approaching its 5th year of grant awards. And I will just tell you, with the grants that were administratively approved by DHCD this month, we passed the $100 million mark in terms of total awards. So it's a really significant milestone and very, very exciting. But here are the criteria that the board established. And this is what we use as staff evaluating it. And when we work with both board members or subject matter experts, this is kind of the lens we look through. First and foremost, we're looking for regional collaboration, which we have defined as meaningful participation of 2 or more localities. Collaboration with industry and other partners. We are really looking for strong evidence that this is a team effort that can come in a number of different ways. Cost sharing is one that is the most visible, resource sharing in other ways, but really, we want to see a regional coalition that is working together to develop the opportunity, to implement the opportunity, and to oversee the success of the project. Secondly is economic impact. We're looking for a target industry focus. The growth and diversification plan, we believe, is the appropriate playbook. And so all projects need to come aligned to really serve, support, accelerate the growth of 1 or more of the targeted industries that are stated in that plan. In terms of economic impact, we're also looking for leveraged non-state resources and/or cost savings. This is in the enabling legislation, and it's something that we think is a significant way to demonstrate economic benefit and really amplify the scale of the effort. And lastly, well-defined outcomes, products, outputs. I'll borrow Deputy Secretary's term. And also, we do use a return on investment calculator when job creation is a deliverable, okay? So if the applicant states this project's gonna create 300 jobs, these are the anticipated wages, we provide a template calculator that shows what the fiscal return to the Commonwealth will be at 2 time periods, a 3 and 5 year. And that's why when you look at your board summary, there's that little table at the end of each, and it says 3-year ROI, 5-year ROI. This is really the most conservative expression. It is the fiscal return to the Commonwealth on the direct jobs that are going to be created by a given project. You'll see more expanded definitions, economic impact that looks at secondary jobs and other things, but this is a very conservative view. And just one of the ways that economic impact or benefit can be expressed in a project. The third one is project readiness. Our grants are 2 years with another year performance period. Go Virginia grants are not designed to provide sustained operating funds for an organization or an effort. We're there to get things started, catalyst. So partner commitment, the match resources in hand. Okay, it can't be, we're gonna go out and try to find some match. We really are looking for match verification forms and commitments at time of application. And then we need to see that the applicant already has envisioned how over the 24 or 36-month timeframe, they are going to accomplish certain goals. And lastly, sustainability, because we do have 2-year grant cycles, that's not a lot of runway. So our application is structured to match these sections exactly. And we ask the question about sustainability, and the applicant has to be able to demonstrate with some confidence that they have a business plan or a secondary resource that they are in position to pursue to sustain the effort. So does anybody have questions about the way that we evaluate applications? I don't want to get too deep into it, but sometimes it's nice to go back and just kind of touch the stone a little bit about how we're reviewing those. This is a project development framework. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we've been using this when we're out meeting with regional council leaders. This is really the project development framework. The sites, talent, startup, and scale up, those are the core investment strategies that the board has approved. Just envision that target industry cluster in the center. And what we've got in the each corner of this illustration are really the questions that the application should answer, right? So if your target industry cluster is, I'll use cybersecurity as an example, when you're in development to develop a talent project, for example, the applicant needs to be able to demonstrate that they understand very deeply what the workforce needs in the industry are. They understand what the workforce system assets are on the ground. And they are understanding where the gaps or lack of capacity are. They're asking really smart questions about how the talent pathway could be strengthened. Or again, if just breaks in the pathway need to be addressed. What would success look like? So this gets to goal setting and outcomes. What kind of strategy are we going to approach for this project? Are we going to try to train people? Are we going to try to retrain people? Are we going to try to retain talent, which we've heard discussed frequently here? Or even are we going to really try to attract talent into the Commonwealth or into our region? And then lastly, who are our partners to implement, which gets to how are we going to come up with a collaborative way to approach this? So we'll share this in the slide deck, and it is something we've been kind of socializing. And it is, I think, instructive as we look through each of these different project types, just to kind of reflect on that. Anybody have questions about this or observations, comments? I think it just shows too, this is really a holistic approach. A reminder, there is not one company in the center of that circle, right? We are trying to provide a supportive ecosystem for a whole group of companies in an industry cluster. So we are not a direct incentive. For our legislators that are in the room, imagine a big circle around that, and that's the policy environment, right? That's the regulatory environment. That's the tax environment. So all of this is, I think, really nested, like a nesting doll, if you will. These regional efforts, there's certainly a state level policy framework that also influences the success of these types of efforts. So. All right, are you ready to move on to projects? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to talk today about, we're going to start with workforce development. These combined projects are requesting $2.27 million, and we've got applications from regions 2, 3, and 6 respectively. The first one is called the Lynchburg Career Acceleration Program. Participating localities are Campbell County, Alta Vista, the town, and Lynchburg, the city. This is, as I mentioned, workforce development. The total request is $550,000. They're bringing to the table match of $352,200 and local match of $214,000. So we do have cash or in-kind value from the localities. This project's unique. It's going to serve as a catalyst to create and fill a pipeline of career seekers who will meet the demands, the needs of high demand trade and sector industries in and around the Lynchburg region. This project is going to focus on some very specific groups of individuals. It's going to focus on what we call opportunity youth. So young people who may or may not readily connect with educational opportunities and employment opportunities in the region. Also pausers, so folks that are perhaps not participating or loosely attached to the labor market because they have not completed their education. And then they're also going to be looking at 2-generation households. And so working with students and their parents to try to provide them with educational opportunities and pathways to employment. This particular project is going to support the manufacturing and advanced manufacturing industries, information emerging technologies, transportation autonomy, as well as life sciences. They've got some very specific outcomes. This is a demonstrated model. This particular applicant came and requested some funds for a planning grant, and this project is really a result of that effort. Staff is recommending this application for approval. The next application is from Region 3, Patrick and Henry Community College, expanding GoTech pathways. Henry County and the city of Martinsville are participating on this particular application. They are interested in increasing dual enrollment opportunities in welding and expand the pool of qualified workers to support that industry sector. Manufacturing, advanced manufacturing are obviously the targeted industry sectors. Outcomes include credentials awarded, number of students trained. Their total request is $118,000, match $129,000, and we are also recommending this project for approval. The next project.
So you don't have anything listed under local match.
That's correct.
Is there buy-in in the community?
Mm-hmm. There is, and let me just make a note here. So, you know, we always ask questions around sustaining, and this is, I think, where Henry County and Martinsville City Public Schools really stepped up and said they were going to be supporting the project after this initial grant. But at this time, there is not local match contributed.
Thank you.
And we'll talk about match a little bit later in the meeting, but at this time, the Go Virginia State Board is not requiring any local match.
So I have one question regarding the Lynchburg one.
Yeah.
Yes, it may not matter, but on the match side of it, you mentioned cash and in kind. Does percentage matter at all?
Establish any kind of criteria around cash versus in kind.
Okay.
And sometimes there are cash match from philanthropy, and that is one of the match sources in this case. In kind is usually expressed as time or donated resources, or sometimes space to conduct an activity. And we've got forms to place valuations on equipment, also to document, time contributed, and so all that can actually verify that. Any other questions? And Senator Ruff, just to go back to the Patrick and Henry, I'm just noting here, the school districts have indicated that they will sustain this effort by providing the tuition subsidy to students to participate in the dual enrollment opportunity. In our discussions, we know dual enrollment is really an important activity for students. Their opportunity to take courses at high school and earn credit with one of our community colleges is really kind of a proven strategy to encourage post-secondary education and while earning a credential in high school, which in many cases is enough to qualify a student for employment in that industry. In some school divisions have resources to pay tuition to the community colleges to allow their students to participate, but not all do. That is just the truth of the matter. And Mr. Knight can probably share a little bit about that. But
Thoughts on that,
yeah,
myself.
for folks that don't know, either the school division or sometimes the parent or family of the child will be asked to pay the tuition at the community college. That's where the credit earning opportunity falls. And unfortunately, not every school division is in a position to fully support dual enrollment. In fact, some don't offer it at all because they can't fit it in their own budgets, and there's a concern that their student population families will also not be able to bear the cost of even what is quite frankly a moderate per credit hour fee. Jim, is there anything else you want to add there?
No, just that we're trying to get a more uniform approach throughout the Commonwealth so that makes that particular tool available. Not only does it help create an opportunity for them to get job training, but it also makes it, it helps reduce the overall cost of getting education. In other words, to an extent you can use dual enrollment to build up some credits and not have to take them in a four-year institution. In the long run, we will make saving money for doing this, but it's got to be uniform, and that's still an area we need to address as a Commonwealth, quite frankly.
In this case, I just want a reminder, right now, Go Virginia has a posture that they do not pay tuition. There are other sources, other resources for tuition. So in the case of the prior application and this one, they're requesting funds to help pay for instructor salaries, which is another challenge of dual enrollment. If the high schools do not have appropriately credentialed faculty, then the community colleges have to pay that faculty through an arrangement. And to get a new program started, which is the case, I think, in both of these cases, they'll be hiring adjuncts, not a new FTE, not creating, I think, what you guys would perceive to be an ongoing obligation for either the school division or the community college, but providing an adjunct faculty member to support students.
Could I just add one other point? I think it's important to note that the legislation that two of our board members, Senators Ruff and Senator Barker, helped get through the General Assembly this past session on a bipartisan basis. As we develop an overall strategy toward workforce training and what have you, that's going to be one of the issues that's going to be addressed. So hopefully we'll have a solution to that as we go forward. So I just want to commend them for doing that.
Thank you. All right, this is from Southern Virginia Community College. Similar, this is an opportunity to expand the Go Tech pathway, which starts in middle school, high school. This is part of the high school experience. Buckingham County, Cumberland County, Prince Edward County. Again, they want to increase dual enrollment opportunities, specifically in mechatronics to support the manufacturing industry. You can see the outcomes named here. They're requesting about $140,000. Bringing together some match. This one's interesting. I'll just give you some examples, Mr. Johnson, of how match can kind of manifest. The community college has used a portion of their Perkins funding to buy the equipment that's going to support this program. Perkins is a federal source that passes through our community colleges and also our high schools. They're receiving some equipment donations from Microsoft, America, Fujikuri, and some scholarship funds supported by Microsoft. So this is one where there is a significant amount of public-private partnerships on the match side, and they are really looking for some resources to support the faculty salary. And I'm assuming there will be an adjunct faculty member. We're recommending this one for approval as well. Yes.
I have a question on the outcomes. 135 credentials in 2 years, 30 students trained out of, is that out of 135? And then out of that 30, only 18 got jobs?
Yeah, that is a pretty typical drop rate, jobs in one of the traded sector industries. So it is possible that students can receive multiple credentials. And a lot of these programs do that, bundle those. And then there are some assumptions. These ratios are actually pretty good, Secretary Cummings, in terms of students who complete the program and then become employed in the industry.
Okay, Sarah, I'd follow up by saying that Buckingham and Cumberland have no industry. So they would be training people that go to jobs.
Got a quick question.
Yes.
The last couple ones, under the requirements of sustainable acre Go Virginia funds is undetermined. How are we going to follow up on that?
Yeah. So in terms of sustainability, the Patrick and Henry Community College, you know, they made a pretty strong commitment from the school divisions to support the tuition for the students. And the tuition should, if enrollment sufficient, support the faculty, right? Cover the faculty costs. What we look for is usually a letter from the school board or superintendent. Now they cannot commit future resources,
Okay,
right?
I understand.
Because these have to be non-state funds. But if we can get a combination of at least a written verbal commitment with the applicant, and if they have other private sector partners that are providing some level of support, that industry engagement is really critical too. So in some cases, we have to go with kind of their strongest expression of commitment on sustainability, which is why we've indicated undetermined in both of these cases.
Thank you.
I think it'll be dependent on enrollment in these programs ultimately. Okay, the next project is a project called Innovation Pathways. The applicant, Stafford County, really acting on behalf of a coalition of school divisions, including Caroline and King George County, are requesting $978,000, bringing match of $563,962, including local match of $244,000, bringing the total project budget to $1.7 million. This application is actually a resubmission. The structure of the application originally, we did not feel put the school divisions in a strong enough position. We have a very strong partner, G3 Community Services and the University of Mary Washington. They are going to be working in collaboration with the Regional Coalition of School Divisions, and they are going to be developing new IT certifications to students across the region. And they were also going to be training teachers so that they will become appropriately credentialed for CompTIA certification so that they can provide the instruction so that students can prepare for these really high value certificates. The outcomes that are listed here, 300 students trained, 36 teachers trained. I will say we have some applications where the teacher training, in my opinion, has more value because one teacher who's appropriately credentialed can teach a lot of students over time, especially throughout their career. So you can see the credentials awarded here. We're recommending this one for approval as well. The next project is from Region 6, Workforce Now. The applicant in this case is the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber of Commerce. They're requesting $250,000 to create and fill work-based learning opportunities. This application was deferred. We immediately held a meeting with the applicant and Region 6 leadership team. They were responsive to our requests, and the work group reviewed this application, the same work group that reviewed it last time around. They had done an enhanced capacity building to basically run a pilot on this program that's going to include career expositions, internship expo, workshops for students, and increase the capacity of the organization there at the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber, who's going to be pursuing an independent, not-for-profit status that's going to really, I think, accelerate their ability to attract private sector resources and grow these programs. Based on the review, we are recommending that this project be funded for $230,000. They had proposed using $20,000 to build a data platform, which we believe is redundant with another state investment, a product called Virginia Voyager, that's going to give students and businesses an opportunity to connect for a variety of work-based learning opportunities. And the board has expressed a desire to not make duplicate investments. And so that is the staff recommendation to approve this project at $230,000. Removing the budget items to build an independent data portal. And Mr. Dyke, I think you were on that work group review.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add.
No, just once again, going back to that bill, an important component of that bill was to have a centralized data collection, so we have some accountability for all these programs. Again, at the point you made about who's actually getting a job. It's one thing to train people, but if we're not getting jobs and we're not doing our job. So there will be, the data will be more available and more consolidated and coordinated. I think very helpful to us.
And consistent. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to keep everybody on the same platform.
Yeah, but we keep looking for it.
All right, the next one is startup ecosystem, and we've got two applications, one from Region 2, which I need to just start putting a map on everyone's desk, but that is in Blacksburg, Roanoke, Lynchburg, and one from Region 9, which is Charlottesville and surrounding region. The first one is Center of Entrepreneurship, Region 2. This is a return application. We recommended for deferral. The applicant, Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, is requesting $240,000 to support an entrepreneurial center of excellence for the greater Lynchburg region that they envision really serving as the anchor and catalyst for the region's ecosystem. They are going to be providing new and early stage entrepreneurs with access to capital and other types of resources to help them accelerate the development of their products and take those into the marketplace. This initiative will provide direct technical assistance to 30 entrepreneurs per year, provide dedicated physical space at the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. This application is also partnering with Liberty University. So I'll just mention that there. And they're going to be working with mentors and providing a variety of support services. The reason we recommended and you supported our recommendation to defer this, really these reasons have been addressed. We met with the applicant, had a conversation, specifically wanting to make sure we were separating the small business development center operations. You know, the state has a small business development center network, and they provide support and services to a wide variety of businesses. But we wanted to make sure that there was some additionality and that this particular suite of services, if you will, was really going to be geared towards high growth potential businesses, either startups, early stage, and to be kind of culled out of that larger population. And we got confidence that that's going to happen. Participating localities are listed there: Amherst, Bedford, Campbell County, Lynchburg City. I will tell you, I read the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance's new strategic plan. This was very central in that plan. The Lynchburg region's unique in that it doesn't have a lot of available industrial sites. I'll just say that if you're familiar with the area. And so I think they're really starting to understand how entrepreneurship can be a core part of their strategy. And they have some really high-tech businesses there. So I think there's some opportunities for some spin-offs as well. And all of that, I think, will become expressed through this center. We're recommending this one for approval. Region 9, the Regional Entrepreneur Ecosystem Building, Orange County, Culpeper Town, Culpeper County, and Greene County. Region 9 has kind of taken an urban and rural entrepreneurial ecosystem approach. This is really going to accelerate networks in the rural counties across Go Virginia Region 9, which, as you would imagine, has kind of more of an urbanized core around the university and then a lot of really diverse activities happening around. They're requesting $200,000, bringing together a match of about $100,820, and that includes local match from the localities of about $50,000. You can see the outcomes here. Obviously, this is going to support new job creation, serve and expand existing businesses, create existing businesses, and engage entrepreneurs as well. We're recommending this one for approval. All right, moving on to cluster scale up. Region 5 has presented an application, demonstration site for clean energy transition to green hydrogen. And it has a nice HRH2 acronym. The applicant is the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. They're requesting about $1.5 million to scale up the clean energy industry in Hampton Roads through the production and use of green hydrogen, while simultaneously addressing critical energy challenges in the region and really looking to drive down the costs of some of these new energy technologies. The proposal has identified 3 main objectives to advance the green hydrogen industry in the city of Newport News. First, they're going to initiate 3 to 5 hydrogen transition projects to drive local industry investment. They're going to establish a hydrogen competency demo center to educate and attract new business to Virginia. They're also going to create advanced workforce and talent programs to support the clean energy sector. Participating localities include Newport News, Norfolk City, Portsmouth City, and the city of Virginia Beach. The outcomes you can see listed here. Definitely looking to raise some additional capital to support this industry, support the creation of new high-paying jobs, also attract new businesses who would likely be involved in green hydrogen energy production or adjacent technologies, train new individuals for this emerging industry, including to deliver and confer some certificates and support up to 25 businesses as a part of this effort just during the grant period. There is a significant amount of match. The majority of that is being presented by Virginia Tech, but not all. Some of that is coming from industry partners. Some of it is coming from WM Jordan, who's actually building the building and is providing a very large, I believe in excess of $400,000 tenant upfit allowance to support this project. We are recommending this project for approval. The next project is from Region 7. This is the Virginia Nanotechnology Network Infrastructure Project, VNNI. In this case, Virginia Tech, again, is the applicant. They're requesting $3.3 million to connect, market, and create a talent pipeline for emerging nanotechnology. And I'll stop there and also say semiconductors, because I don't know that those two things are automatically connected, but I need to talk about semiconductors because I think that is kind of part of the opportunity of VNNI. They are seeking to do a couple of things. One is to connect institutions of higher education across the Commonwealth, namely George Mason University, Virginia Tech, UVA, VCU, and Norfolk State, thank you, into a node system, really to connect and harness not just the research capabilities, but the faculty and the equipment that are involved in nanotechnology and semiconductors. And then secondly, to help create a coordinated pipeline of talent for the semiconductor industry through the development of certificate programs that'll fall under a new Fast Track to Semiconductor Career Program. Okay. So those are the participating localities. You can see them listed as well as the outcomes. One of the products would be the development, of course, of the VNNI network, right? Kind of the codification of the collaborative partnership. There are some additional products, 3 new certificate programs, a cloud-based management system to help connect the nodes, all of their assets. Safety and training modules will be aligned, and the development of a website to promote the VNNI. There were a lot of discussions about this application. Staff is recommending this project for approval with a couple of contingencies. The first is the execution of a formal agreement among the VNNI university partners. And prior to going under contract, we did have conversations with the Secretary of Commerce and Trade and also BEP, who've been looking at opportunities associated with the CHIPS Act, which there's clear alignment here. And so we're further recommending that MOU development happen with some oversight and consultation with the Commerce and Trade Secretariat and BEP to make sure that those efforts are aligned. The project will go under contract upon DHCD receipt and review and the executed MOU as designed and described. So that's our recommendation there.
Yeah.
Question, Sarah, about the certificate program, that's a custom program that will be developed here. Would it be transferable to other states, kind of the national field? How are the standards being set
Sure.
as it's being developed here?
Yes. I don't have all of those details, but my understanding is the 3 certificate programs would be unique to Virginia. And they would be under a new fast track to semiconductor career program. I think to really get the benefit for Virginia to present best as a state that can produce a large number of workers for the semiconductor industry, that, and I don't want to speak for the partners, but all of the universities, and there may be a kind of a syndication of the curriculum. But I do know in Northern Virginia, which is where this application's originated, Micron is a partner in this application. Northern Virginia Community College, who already has a pretty significant program to support semiconductor, particularly technician level training. And then George Mason, if you remember, there was a project approved by this body a few cycles ago to develop some new clean room lab space to accelerate the development of talent to support this industry. And it's not just semiconductors. We use the term nanotechnology. This is, I think, in part about protecting ourselves from the supply chain interruptions that we experienced during the pandemic. Remember, we couldn't get cars, and we couldn't get computers, and we couldn't get phones, but it's true. But really, I think understanding that these particular pieces of equipment, they're going to be in every, when we move towards the Internet of Things, when we think about healthcare, when we think about, really every industry and the importance of nanotechnology and semiconductors.
Just to that point, do you, when you have things that are around a similar ecosystem that you would tend to see, do you put conditions on some of your grants and saying conditioned on you coordinating with these other activities?
Yeah. Yeah, we do that a lot. This one was significant for us to include in this recommendation because for me, it's kind of a little bit of a gating strategy. It's a go or no go. If universities can come forward in this formal partnership, it'll make the project more real. But when it's not $3.3 million, sir, we will oftentimes require the development advisory committees, regular convenings among partners, really to make sure.
Popping up everywhere as you travel around, and a lot of people who could be going after the same thing and not being as effective.
Absolutely, trying to connect the dots. That's one of the exciting things here. This is a Region 7 per capita, meaning they're using their own per capita allocation, but it has statewide implications. When you think about the connectivity of the university system, certainly not all in Northern Virginia, but yeah, I think that's just an observation.
Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to note for the record, that last point was very rough. As I sit here and look at Doug and Haywood, when we were sitting on VREC, and we were very concerned about universities collaborating and working together. This is a huge step, so I'm especially excited about seeing them working together like that. It's terrific.
So do you see these as catalyst dollars, or you just gonna come back 3 or 4 years from now and asking for additional dollars?
Yeah, I see these as catalyst dollars. I think getting the BNNI established is gonna take a certain non-flip. And I will be candid again, a fair amount of this request is support operational, needs, including salaries, for BNNI, and the network and faculty. And we've asked the applicant questions, what's the split here? How much of this is for the workforce and program portion, and how much is kind of for the network infrastructure portion? They're related, but we are trying to get that separation.
I was on the work for the task force. This was a 4-hour discussion, quite deep. And we had a lot of questions. We were also tilting to, it's real important to get going and make it happen. But we didn't want to approve it without some gating measure to make sure that the universities were together and actually get the work done. So in answer to that question, and several questions that you have, I think that's why we're recommending moving forward. But there's some gating measures that they need to jump through, so to speak, before we could actually give them the money.
Okay. And then the last application, is for this district pathway planning initiative. If you remember, last year, there was about $2.5 million in the state budget to help regions get started on this very deep kind of consideration or reflection of what the talent needs were going to be. This one's from Region 5. You can see the participating localities very deep. I think Region 5 is probably doing some of the best work around talent development at a regional scale. The Hampton Roads Workforce Council has been selected as their project manager, if you will, for this effort, and they've got a lot of experience. They've done it in maritime, and they are going to be defining the talent pathways for a couple of industries: cybersecurity, data analytics, and modeling simulation. And they've got some good, strong capabilities there. And the second one being unmanned systems and aerospace, which is also a target industry sector for the Hampton Roads. And again, they've got some very unique assets and capabilities in that space. The total request that each region was allotted $250,000 for this effort. They're requesting that for these two industry sectors. They're bringing together a match of $125,000. That match is coming from a federal grant award, and no local match for additional leverage will be needed. And we're recommending this one for approval as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
this is Delegate Austin. Question for Sarah. Under participating localities, we have for the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, we have Franklin County. Is that not the town of Franklin?
It is, sir. Yeah,
Okay.
you caught that correctly. Thank you. We'll make a note of that change.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Nancy, this is Debbie. Can I make a comment for a minute?
Sure.
So just to give you a sense of the leverage. So in Region 5, I mean, we put out $100 million. You heard that earlier. Region 5 put out about a little less than $2 million to start working on some full-time people that could start working on a maritime cluster. Building on that, they've now got $19 million from the EDA and almost $50 million from the Navy. So $2 million turning into almost 70 is just incredible. I mean, and they're not all going to be like that, but the opportunities, there's such a desire on so many people that are in sectors and feel themselves incapable for different reasons to leverage. And when they see a catalyst for change in an organizational structure with full-time people to do it, it's just a magnet. And so that's just one example. Pharmaceutical in Petersburg and Richmond's another great example. There are others like that. So that just gives, for the new people, that gives you some feel for the impact this program can have with relatively small dollars and how it can scale.
Yeah, I'll take that ROI all day long. Maybe the Silicon Valley Bank should have been listening. Okay, Sarah, anything else? Great summary of the projects. Are there any other questions? Any projects you want to pull out? Otherwise, we will vote for them as a group. Any questions? I'll be sure you feel comfortable.
Move Scott, move support.
Thank you for
Second.
approval. Second, all those in favor in here, in this room, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign. Thank you. Cody, will you please ask those of those who are joining us virtually?
Yes, ma'am. Delegate Olson,
Aye.
Speaker Gilbert.
Aye.
Speaker Gilbert. Thank you. Mr. Holtzman.
Aye.
And Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Projects are approved. Tremendous amount of work. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who worked on this, the work groups, the staff, just momentum's amazing. I'm glad Debbie made the comment he did just to show kind of one example of where you fund something and what happens later. There are more examples. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but first I'd like to ask Sarah to present one more item.
Sure. The next item is the item number 4B, which is about the expiration of Board Policy 11, which defines the program match requirement for projects funded using a region's per capita allocation. So what you see in front of you is actually a section of state code related to awarding of grants to regional councils. So just going to give you a bit of a frame here. Any grant awarded from the fund to a regional council shall require matching funds at least equal to the grant, provided, however, that the board shall have the authority to reduce the match requirement to no less than half of the grant upon a finding by the board of fiscal distress or an exceptional economic opportunity in a region. So the purpose today is really to talk about Board Policy 11 and a little bit about the chronology and the development of that policy. For those that were around at the beginning of the pandemic, the state board elected to relax the match requirements due to fiscal distress experienced by localities, and also just kind of the extraordinary economic impact of the pandemic. The match requirements have been extended, the modified match, if you will, a couple of times in September 2020, and in April of 2021, the board elected to continue the relaxed match until the end of this fiscal year, which is April 30th. So what I'd like to do is just show you the original match scenarios. So you can see we did have some grant types, planning grants in particular, where 2-to-1 match was allowed. I'm going to talk for a second about local match. So there's nothing in state code that calls for localities to contribute financially, either cash or in kind, into a project. But there was a decision made by the Go Virginia State Board early on that in some cases, either 20% of the match required or 50,000, whichever is greater, would need to be contributed by the locality. And I don't want to speak for anyone here, but I think that was feeling, that was kind of that was the strongest expression of regional collaboration and cost share. What you see on the right, the modified match, again, set to expire 6/30/23. Currently, we're 2-to-1 across all grant types, and there are no local match requirements. I'm not bringing this today for a decision, but really just requesting that you guys provide staff some feedback on any information you would like. Nancy and Todd have requested that we get written comments from the region, support organization staff, regional council leadership. If there are other data points or information that you'd like for us to bring back to the June meeting to make a decision on future match requirements, just please tell me.
Nancy, this is Debbie again. Can I make a comment again on this?
Yes, please.
So there's a history here again that goes back some 60 years to the Hahn Commission. The General Assembly decided then that our localities were competing with each other and they were not collaborating. And they then ended up doing planning districts. They also talked about doing service districts. Service districts were never empowered, never happened. Planning districts have actually helped. But we have had a history that has really hurt our economy of localities competing with each other, actually giving grants to have a business move from an adjacent community to theirs. And that's outrageous. Money should never be spent on that kind of thing. And so what we were trying to do when we put this together, I'm an old timer in this, so I apologize to some of you new. We were trying to provide a catalyst to start working together. Not a burdensome thing, but a catalyst. You'll also find if you go take a hard look at where local economic development dollars go, a lot of it goes into the retail sector, which does not drive the economy. It drives who gets the market share in that particular sector. And so this is trying to get a focus on traded sector, growth clusters, revenues coming in from outside the state, and collaborating. And what we're hearing back from a lot of localities, it's hard to put it in the budget. Most of them have budgets of, not all, but most of them have millions of dollars of budgets. Putting a couple $100,000 as a contingency in there to do this is not a hard thing to do. And so I honestly believe that some of our regional councils need to politicize this a little bit and go start talking to those people and say, we think it's important to do this. I'm not stating a final conclusion on it because I think everybody's got to have their own thoughts. But the background is we still are struggling to get our localities to collaborate. It's gotten better. And the collaboration that really has occurred is in all sorts of non-local people coming together against these ideas and working on regional projects. That's a huge win for us in Go Virginia. We're still struggling to get localities, with some exceptions, to really participate. So I just give you that as a little bit of the historical background.
Thanks, Debbie. Like Sarah said, we don't want a decision today, but we would like some thoughts if you have them now, or as you think about them, if you can send them to Sarah. We're going to ask each of the regions for their input as well, and try to do a little data gathering to figure out where, what localities have participated, where have we seen them not, and just any intelligence we can get about that. Any thoughts or?
Chairman, if we don't take any action at the June meeting, then it will revert back to where it was. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we will, I'll send a note out to everyone. Please do not reply all. If you've got an idea for me in terms of data to collect, let me know. We did issue a memo or administrative guidance on meaningful local participation because we felt as staff when the local match requirement fell away that we weren't seeing, to Debbie's point, that kind of, significant regional collaboration. And so I will share that with all of you as well, just so you can see what we've done in lieu of. A letter of support. Pia always said if I had a dime for everyone, I'd be a rich woman, but we're really looking for engagement in the development of the project, the implementation of the project, and the oversight, and ultimately as sharing in the success of that effort. So when the match question comes up, just, there's a couple ways that we can capture that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sarah, so it goes back to the way it was, but then at the kind of program, kind of administration level, with the waiver process and refinement and that part of the application process, is there ability and flexibility there if we kind of let this reset back to where it was? Just kind of think about how waivers could be used.
Yes, that's a good point. So the underlying sections here in state code, fiscal distress, we have defined. The Commission on Local Governments actually calculates what we call a fiscal stress index. It's a combination of factors, but this really gets to a locality's ability to generate taxes, which in turn is their ability to participate financially. in a project. So we have for every locality a measure of fiscal distress. Objectively, DHCD, we could apply that criteria. And an applicant could come to us with a request, such as we're in fiscal distress, here's evidence of such. The exceptional economic opportunity is a little vague, so I may need, some of your help in terms of defining that. And of course, a significant economic opportunity in one community would be different than another, just based on scale and size. So that's something to consider. I will say DHCD needs to develop a more consistent waiver process and procedure. And if the board does elect to let it go back to the old match situation, then we would come forward with an accompanying administrative guidance that would talk about a waiver process, so that the applicant knew as their application was being developed, I'm going to qualify under the 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 match scenario, so that the budget could be developed accordingly.
Okay, so input from that would be useful. A couple other things. One is, I just want to socialize this notion with you, and would like to talk about it more in our next meeting or two. And that is our board policy number 4 was approved in December 2017 once we got started. And they're in your packet, pages 44 and 45, if you want to look at it. I'm just bringing up the idea. You don't really need to read anything at this time. But that policy has 2 parts. One is focused on the usage of Go Virginia funding for educational scholarships. The other is the focus on the traded sector, and that we don't use funds for the non-traded sector. And I want to bring up that I would like us to consider expanding that to include healthcare. So Go Virginia funds are not used for healthcare, and depending on your definition, the traded sector does include referral centers, major academic medical centers, and you know that we use, education is not a traded sector either, but education flows through all of this. And we've had a number of requests from healthcare entities as we look at how to grow workforce, how do we work on innovation and entrepreneurship, because most of the major hospitals or health systems are investing in innovation. And so we want you just to think about, is this something that we should expand our definition to include? Like I said, no need to do anything today, but bringing that forward to you.
Nancy, can I make a comment? I've been thinking about this a little bit. And I can remember, it's a little bit more than a decade ago, I mentored one of your physicians who was an oral surgeon, pediatric oral surgeon, who invented and commercialized two products at Cruian, I guess on his own, but he invented it while being a clinician at Cruian. And I'm just wondering, both of them became big successes. I'm just wondering if we can envision a scenario, for example, could Go Virginia funds in some construct be used to help stimulate what I would say would be, clinical innovation and commercialization? Because you have, just your healthcare system, but around the state, there's a number of these healthcare systems. There are thousands and thousands of very, very bright people that come to work every day, and some of them in their clinical practices see needs, but there's no stimulation, there's no forcing function. I could see you just carve out that little piece of it and say, how could Go Virginia create some funds, set aside some funds, help stimulate more of that would create products that would benefit not just Virginians, but, the world. And I do think, at that point, that is not just the service industry. So I would raise my hand and say, look, I think we can come up with a construct that would work.
Thank you. There are lots of examples, but I can give you 2 that you may know. One's the so-called surgical robot. The first surgical robot was actually developed by one of our residents. And now that's called Surgical Intuitive. It's a $1 billion company. The little thing called a boot, when you've broken your ankle, that was developed by a Virginian. So there's a lot of opportunity to move to commercialization quickly, true. But so I just want us to think about, is it time for us to expand our definition a little bit and see if this would be helpful to stimulate innovation?
Nancy, to add to that, I would say Tennessee has already been there for like 10 years, in particular work with Nashville, as you probably know. Yeah, so. Probably should catch it.
I would just have a concern about, do we have the expertise to be able to do things like that? That's there's a vehicle to do it through, then that could be interesting where we help support that deployment, but so. Well, no, there's for everyone, there's 100 that have dreams but can't bring it to reality.
Well, I think you still have to collaborate. You have to use all the criteria in the beginning. It shouldn't be just investing in one person or one entity. I'm smiling to myself though, because I was on the green hydrogen workforce, and Lord knows I have no ability to evaluate the use of hydrogen as energy, but I'm totally fascinated now becoming a tiny little bit of interest in it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just interested in it's your world, your thoughts on how you would actually manage that, looking at a portfolio of IT and what clears the bar to get funding from something like that.
I think a lot of this innovation, the clinical innovation is applied. It's very applied. A doctor will see or a clinician will see a need and they'll say, well, if you just change it a little bit, it'll work. And, so I'm not talking about far out research. I'm talking about ideas that can be quickly commercialized. Now, how do you do that? I mean, the state and through in part some Go Virginia funding, we do help fund accelerators and things like that help draw and pull this technology out. But look, I don't know the exact construct, but I just think that we did, and this, Debbie, you were the one that kind of, I think, made the right call where we can't support all service industries, but there are sectors within medicine, I think, that really, and health, that really, we're leaving some stones unturned, that maybe it's low hanging fruit.
Another example might be, we're so excited about the pharmaceutical piece that we've launched that Go Virginia helped do. Where did that come from? Came from a group of us, hospital administrators, so to speak, talking about how do we get cheaper drugs made quickly. And so we created a business, and that business then stimulated work at VCU that Go Virginia is now going to be a really important part of our economy. Just like that.
This is it's on the governor's agenda. The IPC is the vehicle. They got incremental funding and they're really trying to raise their game to be able to do these kinds of things. So just keeping that in mind. I think it's a great idea.
Nancy, again, this is Debbie. I have never thought, I've always thought it's 20% of our economy is in healthcare. Innovation and that's can absolutely lead to traded sector opportunities. And when we look at the startups that we've talked about, we haven't just restricted that so long as there's a vision that it can be a product that could be distributed outside the state, not just used internally. So I'd be all in favor of finding focused accelerators. And as Steve is saying, properly administered with proper funding, none of which exists, by the way, right now. And going for it, my Lord. I can't imagine us being a more attractive place given what's been going on and given what you just talked about in Petersburg. I think the issue gets down to talent and trying to figure out how to do that. The governor has addressed that a lot in this budget by putting some monies in there because we all know it's a critically important thing. But Doug is right. We did the VRSC. Innovation and commercializing those great ideas, and healthcare is right in the middle of it. And yet we're really not pushing it the way we could. So just as one person, I think it's a very creative, interesting idea.
Thank you. Thanks, Debbie. Leah?
And Jeremy, ask you a question from the healthcare profession and sector. So we want these big companies, we want innovation, we want people to live across the state, rural communities, but hospitals don't have staff to provide basic healthcare, emergency room stuff. So non-traded sector, when I see this, I think about nurses and CNAs and all of that type of skill building, which is, I mean, a different part of our state system. I recognize that. There's other programs for that. But if there is kind of some nurse training or some other kind of skill development baked into proposals that come through this, is that what we're saying we're gonna consider potentially as we add non-traded sector? Because is it a need that we, that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that can come through talent pathways.
Okay.
And workforce development, so there's could be a vehicle for that that's not necessarily innovation.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Other comments? Well, we'll spend some more time thinking this through. But speaking of change, we do need to take a look at our bylaws, and maybe some of this we can forward through that conversation too. Pia has happily volunteered to review our bylaws and report back to us. Thank you, Pia. Importantly, it's almost time for some of us who have terms that are ending. And so if you look on page 47 in your packet, there's a memo here that summarizes the code language about board membership and the current roster of our membership, including when your current terms are set to expire. Me, myself. And for the gubernatorial appointees, please take a look at this, and if you want to be reconsidered, then you need to go to the Commonwealth, Secretary of Commonwealth's webpage and indicate your willingness to serve. So I hope all of you will take a look at that, and if you're eligible to serve, and Sarah's gonna send a note to everyone just to help you facilitate what you need to do next. Over the next couple of years, we have some turnover on them next time.
We will have some turnover.
We will have some turnover. And then I think the last thing on my agenda is that about a year and a half ago, when we had a bit of a summit, we had a longer meeting. I think people really enjoyed it. We learned a lot from each other. And so I'd like to suggest that we have sort of a retreat. And so we're going to be looking at opportunities for that and get back to you with some dates, places, timing, and so on. Sarah, anything else you've got?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 13th. It will be a meeting done electronically, if that's all right with everyone. And then we'll give you more information, hopefully at that time, about a retreat in September. And that meeting will be in person. You got to celebrate. So last thing I'll say is that we've reached that $100 million. It's amazing. The Secretary of Commerce and I have been talking, and Sarah, about getting our word out a little bit more. Because, one of the reasons that I asked Sarah to go through all that criteria at the beginning of the meeting is to help us out, be clear about how significant this work is, how much is done behind the scenes, so to speak. So we come and we ask some questions and approve, but there's a ton of work, and we ought to be celebrating and marketing the cool things that we're doing, feel good about the outcomes. The example that Debbie just gave shouldn't be something we just talk about among ourselves. So we're going to be looking for some opportunities to, and I'll use the word more loosely, mark, really put forward the good work that we're doing. Thank the General Assembly for, funding this, for having the vision at the beginning, for continuing to support us. This is really important work that we're doing across the Commonwealth. And I want to thank all of you for your service. Very thoughtful, very engaged, ask great questions. I know that you want this to work, and you're seeing the evidence of it. So thanks to all of you as well. Thank you. All right, we are adjourned.
I know, 5 minutes.